All right, hello, welcome. I'm Chris Lato. Welcome to the channel. This is a informal live stream, so my basic first live stream with basically some recent friends. So DJ and Nathan. DJ, he is a UAP analyst. Essentially, he retired from the Air Force back in 2011, so 10 years ago, as a flight engineer. So he's used a lot of these systems. He has tons of hours flying, a lot of MVG hours actually. I was interested. We may get to DJ about your, I think, almost 1,400 hours of MVG time as well. So DJ is with us. As well as Nathan. So Nathan, I'll let them both introduce themselves here shortly. But he also works on the podcast with DJ. It's Life MMA and MBA is the name of their podcast. They've run for several years now, and so. Nathan, he is very interested in all this UAP stuff and enters to really ask questions. The idea is they were interested in why is the Tic-Tac extraordinary. So a little over to you, DJ. Tell us about yourself and why you're here.
Yes, sir. So yes, this is a different iteration of many podcasts I've done. Most of my podcasts have been MMA focused. This year I started doing Life MMA and MBA just so that I could cover a variety of different topics. I wanted to step away from trying to popularize the UFC because of how they treat their fighters. Nathan and I just started doing some stuff together in the last month or so because I had him on with Andy of that UFO podcast, and Nathan was so brilliant that in analyzing the UAP phenomenon that I just wanted to do more stuff with him. And once you hear him, you'll understand why. But yeah, former Air Force flight engineer, about just under 4,000 hours of flying.
On which aircraft? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I started off in the C-130H like a lot of guys. You fly what we call slicks before you go into AFSOC. And then if you get yourself selected to go into AFSOC, I flew the Combat Talon 2. Most of my time was on that. And then I did my last 3 years. Combat Talon 2 is like a low-level infill, exfil, airdrop, resupply.
Special forces.
Yeah, it can fly in zero visibility at 250 feet all night long.
Yeah, that's crazy.
At night, all that stuff. So it was and still they're working on a replacement. Still, it's the most advanced platform for that in the world until they just get finished with these last few pieces of its replacement. Then they're going to retire all of them. Then I flew this one called the MC-130W, which was a replacement for the Combat Talon 2. We crashed 4 of those. So they bought some replacements and then decided to turn them into a precision strike platform, a gunship, if you will. And it was called the AC-130W. So I finished up on there. Like you said, I got a lot of MVG time, a ridiculous amount of having those things on my head.
What about the FLIR systems? Are those compatible?
So the one that we used was the one that you'll see in the Aguadilla video, the MX-15. The FLIR systems that we used prior to that were not all that advanced. They were made basically for doing MVG low level and for doing MVG landings. And then when we became a gunship, we got much more advanced. Now they're using an MX-20 or an MX-25. So it's even, since I retired, it's gone up 2 generations. But
okay, so the same system, right? The same as Aguadilla.
Exact same system.
Okay, so you used that for years, I guess.
A couple of years, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, excellent. So so you approached me. I liked your enthusiasm and motivation. So Nathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a fly on the UFO UAP wall, an average American just coming into this topic in recent years. Fascinated by the technological ramifications of these videos. Just like a lot of folks who follow this, really interested to learn more, get your perspective, and ask some questions that I think are on a lot of people's minds about where we go from here if in fact these things are doing what they are purported to be doing.
Yeah, hi everybody. WTI Baron. Sorry, I don't know how to say it. Dragonfly, Trey T. Good to see you guys. The Signal. So thanks for being here, and thanks as well, Nathan. You bring a good viewpoint as well. Where I've kind of struggled to, I always thought people knew what MVGs meant. I use that when I go back and talk to like family or friends. I'll just throw around these terms, and basically people don't the normal American doesn't know what MVGs means actually. It's like a kind of a foreign concept. It's difficult to consider. So I'm glad you're here as well, and we'll be taking questions at the end from all the people here. So thanks for being here. So DJ, we were talking a little bit before we started here, but your point, and I think the point of this live stream is basically your argument is that there's so many witnesses, especially for the Nimitz encounter. So for this, we'll just focus on the Nimitz encounter, but at the end, we can take questions as well. Around 45 minutes for this, and then we'll take questions for about 30 minutes. But basically, if you look at the Nimitz encounter, and I just started looking really deeply into the evidence and listening to all of the witness accounts, and you look, there's just so many people that actually just looked at these with their eyes, with binoculars on the Nimitz. You have almost 5,000 people or something in a carrier group, and these things were following them supposedly in 2004, following the Nimitz, to where you could just go up and use the big eye, which is this big camera system right on the front. And Gary Voorhees was saying that he would just go look at the big eye and then ended up just using his binoculars, and I have a good set of like Nikons from hunting and stuff. I'm not a good hunter or anything, but yeah, basically hundreds of people saw these things doing really crazy maneuvers. And so, yes, I think we should exhaustively research all the possibilities. That's what you do in any like crash safety investigation, is you make sure that every single possible explanation is ruled out. But for this purpose of this really is just what if we can just assume for the purpose of this conversation that the Tic-Tac is legitimate, so all of the claims that were made were correct. What does that tell us about why it's extraordinary? And basically, if there's any questions about the FLIR system, so I have it set up here. I have like my Xbox set up so we can talk through basically this energy circle at the beginning just blows me away. Mick West brought that up, and I was like, man, you're right. Like, because before I thought it was tail on, so basically some points, but really kind of just focusing on the Tic-Tac, why it's extraordinary, and basically answering your questions. So an informal kind of question answer session. So that's the idea for this podcast.
And Nathan has a series of questions that he wants to ask from a layperson standpoint, and that's going to add a lot of value because, like you said, a lot of people, the Army calls them NVDs, night vision devices. We call them NVGs, night vision goggles. I mean, so, we got to, be careful with our terminology. But the most, to me, like to step through it chronologically, beginning with the radar, Kevin Day tracking these on radar for several days, I believe 7 nights, 7 days prior to saying to his leadership, I think we ought to send the skipper Fravor and his wingmen to engage this and see what it is, visually observe it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, starting there, so the SPY-1 radar, I worked with this in my last job. I was at the Tactical Leadership Program, and we did an exercise where basically we bring in all these NATO crew, would bring their fighters together, and then we put them through this. It was a month-long course, and we shortened it to 2 weeks. This course together. So at the end, they're like this fighting team. I think it's an amazing concept. Actually, it's probably the best way to do training, actually. But one of those missions is against a ship. So we would get a ship, and they would do this crazy, borderline, dangerous attack against a ship. Because attacking a ship is just very, very difficult. There's MCON procedures. MCON means you have to turn off all of your emissions.
Emitters.
So you can't make a call on the radio. The data link that I'm sure you'll be talking about at some point with that you can't transmit anything, as soon as you talk on the radio, ship knows you're talking on the radio, and so they're very dangerous. And so I've learned, and I actually got to see a few briefs exactly on the SPY-1 radar, because the Aegis cruiser is F-100. It's a F-100 ship. It's an awesome ship that I believe they purchased from the U.S. So Spain has. It's Aegis cruiser, and it has those flat plates. And that's that actively scanned array technology. In the radars that I always used, it was this mechanical scan. It's a conical radar that has to scan back and forth. But those giant flat plates that you see, on these crazy looking ships, that's the radar. And that whole radar actually, it's an array. So an array of tiny little radars. So tiny little like pixels, if you will, and now they can aim those pixels wherever they want. So if they want to put the full power of the radar and jam you, they can, or so they can bounce it around. So the Navy is amazing in their electronic attack capabilities. I did electronic attack in the aggressors up in Alaska, and we were using these electronic attack pods, and the best ones we could get were the Durham technology jammers, digital radio frequency memory. It's really digital jammers, and they came from the Navy. The software we were using, the codes, even a lot of the hardware was from the Navy. So the Navy, I think, is just kind of ahead in a lot of ways. In certain ways, I think all the other services have their big advantages and disadvantages. But you bring up a great point. This SPY-1 radar that they just put in, that was a huge upgrade. And from my understanding, again, limited, is that it can see very high up. If you're looking at high missiles, so if you're trying to detect inbound incoming missiles, you're trying to defend certain Middle Eastern countries or whatever. So they look up, actually. That SPY system is looking up. So that's why I can see these things coming down from like 80,000 feet, et cetera.
Or more. I don't know that they want to tell us how high, but he said 80,000 feet at least. So.
Yeah. What's up, Hayden King and Don D? Welcome, guys. Furtis 7. Thanks for being here. Yeah.
And I just want to explain one thing that you were saying, what a lot of people understand about radar is Chris talked about a phased array radar. That's what we're talking about here. And he also mentioned a spinning dish, the type, and for an aircraft radar, it would go to the width of the gimbal. But, if you look at like an air traffic control radar that would spin 360 degrees, little blips would appear on the screen. And it was up to the ability of the radar operator to look at that on his screen and figure out, okay, that's an aircraft that's traveling at this speed. There's rage rings. And there was a lot of interpretation from the radar operator. Now we're taking those returns. We're sending them through signal processing units. And there's a lot of computerization that's going on with those radar returns that come back that we didn't have. That goes on the aircraft. When we're going to talk about jamming later on, those signal processors interpreted that they were being jammed. And in the case of the SPY-1, there's any number of hundreds or thousands of things that it's interpreting to that then the operator's going to look at and put their, for them to look at and interpret and give feedback to command in C2.
Did they receive jamming, I guess, from
Alex has
received jamming
of their ship? Yeah. I don't think so. That's the interesting question. So that's almost like your first big question. Okay. Did this object not determine that phased array? Either it didn't A, interpret it to be a threat, or B, did not have the ability to jam it, one or the other. Because the energy that's being put out by a SPY-1 is not a focused beam of high RF energy that will literally make you feel warm inside. Yes, I felt it before, accidentally walking in front of an aircraft that was testing high RF energy radar on the ground. Yeah, it wasn't good. I went back to the squadron. Luckily, we were on an ETIC for over an hour and a half, and I thought I was going to puke at my desk the whole time. But anyway, that is undeniable, that undeniable focus beam of energy, and I don't think the phased array represents that. Do you?
Well, like I just said, so a phased array, they can program it how they like. So you could from my basic understanding, right? I'm not a radar expert, but from my understanding is you could take all of those little pixels and point them at the same point in the sky, and maximize power. Or you could just take one little pixel and send it over here digitally, and then send one little pixel over here and keep track of these targets. And that's what they're doing. And yes, of course, you're always any system. If you're tracking something, the best is passive, right? So passively tracking something, obviously they don't know that you see them. But with radar, that's the whole point, is you have to send energy that is being sent back, so they can detect that energy. And when you send the energy, so the way electromagnetic radiation travels is that it's by the square root of the distance, right? So basically, if you have a flashlight and you bring the light up to it, you won't see against a wall. You won't see any light, and then all of a sudden you'll see the light on the wall. You'll see the circle on the wall. That's because the energy is dispersing. This is a square root in a square. Okay, so it decreases by the square root of the distance, by the square of the distance, however that works. And so the point is, you have to send a lot more energy one way than back. So it's easy to detect that you're being targeted, because they have to send double the energy that their rate, much more, magnitudes of order more than the energy than the radar needs to detect. So you can do a lot of things with ASA, and yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I'm sure
that's the first anomaly.
Systems. Yep.
That's the first anomaly, is why didn't it, if it could jam a phased array radar, why didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Well, the first thing is, what do we know from that? Assuming, again, assuming it's all legit, right? So we're assuming that it's completely, everything's taken at face value. It can pick up these things, right? That was kind of interesting to me, because if you look at a lot of the FLIR videos, none of them have any range, or I believe none of them show any true range to the target that's based off of energy coming back, right? Because basically you have to send that energy pulse out, and it has to be coded, because it's military systems, right? People have to remember that these systems that we're using, they're all designed with the requirements that they can be anti-spoofed, anti-jammed. So each pulse that it sends out is specifically coded. Also, you don't want to get confused with other random codes out there. But so each little pulse is specifically coded, so when it comes back, it can say, yeah, this is my pulse, and it took this long to go that far, so I know how far away it is, right? That's how the radar pulses it. But what's happening is, for some reason, the ASA, the big system on the ship, right, which has these tiny little, which can send out these little pulses that are hard to detect, that can pick them up, or maybe it's the processing in there. But when you look at the radar, although Chad Underwood did say he picked it up on radar, as soon as it seems like it's getting a lot of energy on it, it just drops it. And a lot of people have been saying it's due to jamming. I guess it could be. There's nothing saying that it isn't. The response is from the radar is that it's being jammed.
The signal processor thinks it's being jammed.
Exactly. What it said, all we know for sure, 100%, is that it has been modified. From outside of whatever parameters the radar is expecting. So that's an interesting result to me. Is that it has been modified, so it's getting pulses back. So it's reflecting. So it's reflecting off this. So if you go, I think I saw one question, like the pulse bubble, or what is it? If it's in like a plasma bubble. That would be an interesting question to actually ask, is what happens if you throw radar, a pulse train, because it's a bunch of pulses in a row. If you throw a pulse train at a plasma, what bounces back? Is it?
Yeah, and the plasma argument. I mean, there's just so many different hurdles that they would have to leap over in order to be a plasma bubble, because now we'd have to look at where was it projected from. We're in a circle here that was somewhat concentric. So would Fravor have flown through their projection? So I've kind of dismissed the plasma bubble argument. I think this is an object of a substance that the radar that they were able to track actually make a shape out of it and say, okay, that's a shape, and that shape looks very similar to the VisOp.
Okay, so you're saying they were able to basically shape it from the radar returns?
You saw it. I mean, you saw
the
it. Oh, I'm
TV.
sorry, the FLIR. Excuse me. Yeah, what you're seeing on the FLIR jives with the VisOp.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what it looked like on radar. We may never know that.
Yeah, I do want to show it later because I've seen a couple arguments saying there's confusion between the TV and the IR mode. In the TV mode, that's we can talk through a little bit more of that. But let's just finish with the radars. So and basic jamming. So we know the ship saw a bunch of these, right? So it sounds like there was many of them. And then we know that Chad Underwood was able to lock at least get a vector. So sometimes what you'll have on your radar is it'll give you a hit saying that it's receiving some energy there, but then you command a lock on that point, and now it's telling your radar to focus on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to do that. You could just fly towards that point in space where it's hitting. It's much harder to do this type of intercept, right? Normally, an intercept in a fighter is difficult. It's not so easy to intercept another target, especially if it doesn't want to be intercepted. You have to really know how fast it's going. If something's 30 miles away and it's going, 300 miles an hour, and you don't know which direction, it's kind of hard to intercept it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's hard to intercept these things without specific radar lock and radar information. So, Chad Underwood in his F-18, they had to vector. They probably had a vector kind of aiming for it like this until they were able to get close enough. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, Chris, I have a question. So I think a lot of folks don't understand, or at least I didn't understand, the high degree of fidelity that these systems have now. I think we're not clued into that and realize how precise these things can be. But they're also, as you pointed out, just like incredibly advanced. Like there's a lot of technology that's going into a phased array radar that is in operation. Is it safe to say that with the introduction of all of these new technologies, that also brings or opens up the door to additional complications? So the more complex the system is, the more sort of vectors of failure that may be there, and if that's true, I guess I'm curious, what kind of redundancies are at work within a platform like this? So is there another type of system that would also be in operation that would be a secondary confirmation to what the array may be returning to the operator?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I'm not. I'll talk to Kevin Day hopefully and just get his expert take on it.
Sure.
Shortly. I'll invite him on the show and ask. It's all good questions, but yes, 100%. Again, like every single inch of a Navy ship is for military operations. They take it very seriously. All the money's spent, ideally in all the right places. And yes, you have to have multiple. You have to have multiple systems in a line, for degradation purposes. Graceful degradation is what the current term is, right? You're not just going to lose all of your knowledge. You're not going to lose all of your capability, but you will see, we call it graceful degradation, is that you will lose certain capabilities. And it depends on what systems you're losing that those capabilities will interact. And that's exactly why people like Kevin Day are even there. If everything worked, if the Spy 1 radar worked, I think it's fully automatic. I think you literally need like no one there. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to take so much cheap, but I think you can set it on fully automatic. And I've seen Patriot systems, which is scarily just fully automatic. It's literally just automatic. So everything works on its own. So when things are working well, these systems are fully ridiculously made to be easy to use. And really, the point is to have all these people there, and really why they get paid the big bucks is because they know how to do all that graceful degradation. So when this doesn't work, they know how to execute this. Like they still get the mission done. That's Yeah, 100%. It's all
And
built with redundancy.
And it's not as if this tech just sort of rolled out of the lab on a day one and got slapped onto a carrier, right? I mean, it went through a lot of testing before it went out there in the field of operation.
I'd actually like to speak to that real quick because I heard one of my friends on podcast the other night suggest that during the Nimitz encounter that the Spy 1 radar was still in test or something, I think they said. And I want to say by virtue of the fact that it was deployed on a system about to go into the battle space, it was not in test. It was operational. Something that's in test is not employed to go off on a med deployment as it was. That means they've already tested it in garrison, so to speak.
Yeah, they were prepping it for deployment. So this is their spin up. The whole carrier group. The point is they go off, off the coast and practice their blue water ops essentially while they're not in the blue water. So yeah, it was why it was the newest systems. That's why they installed it, because they were just going to go downrange, etc. Well, if you look at my video on the Omaha, right? So I did the Omaha deep dive. If you look, Nathan, on that video, you have the Sea Giraffe. That's the actual tracking radar that we're talking about. That's the advanced kind of ASA system, if you will. It does spin, but it's still electronically scanned. But then in the front, you also have a rotating Sea Marine radar. And that's actually the radar that I believe is in that I show in the video. Initially I had it as that was the Sea Marine. And then I was like, I think I basically just changed it at the last minute, made a mistake. So,
okay. Great.
But yeah, they have multiple systems. So that Sea Giraffe is going to be that'll be linking to their weapon system. But then you also have that Sea Marine radar that's going to give them other types of SA. So there's tons of redundancies.
And so when Kevin Day goes through his sort of mental checklist of observing all of this feedback, and he gets to finally on that checklist where we got to send human beings out to this thing. I mean, he's probably exhausted a whole lot of analysis to want to get to that point. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, so basically to get out to say it again, I'm sorry, I missed it. I was looking at the comments.
Yeah, sure. So to get to the point where you're sending human pilots out to investigate this behavior, you've already gone through a long laundry list of options trying to answer the question about what is this? Yeah,
and this is good context. Okay, I haven't talked to the pilots actually, but you have to remember, so Fravor, right? Call signs. Yeah, I won't even mention it. Anyway,
Badass. Let's just call them that.
It's call sign. The Navy's so bad with their call signs too. So Fravor, he had just taken over command. He's basically the top of. He's the fast burner. We want to make you a general, son. Basically hardworking. Went to Top Gun school. And when I was growing up, everyone wanted to be a squadron commander. That is the ideal. That's the point. That's the dream ideal. I guess maybe like professional football players want to win. Whatever you call it now,
right?
The Super Bowl. What is
whatever you call it.
whatever you sports people call it. No, I'm just kidding. I do watch.
You better start watching soccer sports, if you're living in Portugal. Let me just say that.
I play a lot of sports. But anyway, so Fravor, he's basically entering the pinnacle of his career. That's the pinnacle. That's like the dream fighter pilot career is. You go to the weapons school. You're the top of the top. You go to the weapons school. And then you're basically a combat whatever machine, and then you become a squadron commander, and then you lead a squadron into combat. It's like the warrior's dream, I guess.
Youngest air wing commander in the Navy at that time.
That was Fravor. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So and he's, from everything I can tell, I don't know him personally, haven't contacted him yet. I plan to shortly. I want to do my own analysis, so I don't want to ask him questions he's already answered 100 times. But yeah, he just is taking over this squadron for the first time. It just is so unprecedented. I'm sure Kevin Day, I'm sure he did not want to go and tell Vector Fravor onto these other contacts. That's like, it kind of feels like everything else is broken down. Like they were trying to pass this up to the higher ups, like, hey, sirs, we're seeing these alien things, and kind of expecting maybe more action. That's what I assume. And then I think at some point he's like, okay, I'm gonna affect this mission, right? Because everybody has a certain training mission they're going to do. They were doing simple air defense. I think it's just 1v1, I guess. And so basically they had a mission, and that's the whole point of all this training, is to do this mission. So the fact that Kevin Day went and like said, hey, to the commander, go look at this.
Yeah, the Air Wing commander.
Pretty telling to me. It's very telling to me that it kind of, it feels like the communication throughout the levels just kind of broke down, or they didn't take it seriously. Or I don't know if they talked prior to that. Did Dave Fravor ever say like, hey, go and
No, he had an out. He had an out, Kevin Day did, because he didn't have to tell them what he thought it was, because that would have made alarm bells go off throughout the entire leadership structure of the ship and the Air Wing. All he had to say was, there's something out there. We don't know what it is. Can you go look at it? There's something in our working space. And so stop training, go look at it. So that's the context with which it began.
Yeah, that's a big too. And so that's the ship, but let's also talk about the E2, which I made that recent video about. So the E2 is AWACS is amazing. Really at the end of the day, like, again, the fighter pilots probably kill me. But having a really good airborne warning and control, having the quarterback up there who's doesn't think they know everything, and they can work with the fighters out in decentralized kind of operations. Those guys, the controllers, they can make or break the operation. I've totally seen it, because all we did in Spain was we were doing these large force exercises where you have a team, you make a game plan together. This is what we're trying to do with all these different. You analyze the threats, the targets, you make up your tactics. But the quarterback of that whole team is the AWACS. And they're not. They execute the plan more. It's kind of this complicated way we do it. In Russia, actually. So I studied Russian tactics for a long time, and a little bit Chinese tactics. But they take their top pilots. So they would actually take Fravor, in this case, the Russians, and they put him on the E2. And so in a real like fight or whatever, Fravor would be like on the E2, and I guess he would be like literally controlling, or at least in some sense, you have a guy of that capability, that skill. They take him out of the plane and they're like, no, you're too important. You got to be controlling the chessboard. That's how they think of it. Very, I'm going to move this system here. He shoots
centralized control.
Yeah. So that's a centralized control idea. And in a lot of ways, it does make sense, because we do get in a little. There is some friction between the controllers out in the world, just over the whole world. I think there's just there is some friction between controllers and the pilots. Because the pilots like, no, we execute the plan. It's our plan. We do everything, and they're like, no, but we know everything. We've got the bird's eye view. So there is a battle, but the point is they are a critical element of all this stuff. And the point of the AWACS is it can be forward, right? Because if you're going over the sea, or if you're going into over territory it's not yours essentially, or if you need to look down, then you have an airborne aircraft, okay? Because of the shape of the Earth, if you put all your radars on the ground, then low altitude coverage is a difficult issue for you. Like all the fighting used to be, I think a lot of countries still do low altitude fighting, because it's hard to shoot something that's tree level. And going very fast, unless if you have a AWACS, and an AWACS is just flying above, so you can just you're flying down low, but it doesn't matter because I can see you. I have line of sight with our radar, right? So all your that's your radar energy. It needs to bounce off and come back. So the point is the E2 is very capable radar as well, and in a different radar band than your Spy 1 radar. Again,
and also tracking it.
Yep.
Also seeing the object and had those tapes pulled. You heard the maintenance guy, the avionics maintenance guy who put those bricks from the E2 in the safe, and an Air Force officer walked in and he said he knows that because of the patches.
That's a crazy story, right? The Men in Black story. This is
someone with civilian clothes with that person.
Was he in a black suit? Like, to be so, it's just so classic.
There's been a lot that's come out. My eyes I would say the last 7 days or so, my eyes have been very opened about some of the disinformation programs that apparently Air Force OSI was involved in, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of put out certain pieces of information to hide other things, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the purpose of our podcast here.
Yeah,
But
exactly. I mean, so again, I've been wanting to do this deep dive on the Nimitz, but there's just so much information. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to point out that I put in our chat earlier is that, so you wonder why, with all this automation and this literally multi-million-dollar Spy One radar, what do you need Kevin Day for? And the reason that you need Kevin Day, and when you hear him talk, and he'll talk about that, is the reason that he went to Top Gun school is not because the radar does everything automatically. The reason he went to Top Gun school and graduated is because he has seen thousands of tracks, so he can look at something and know what he's seeing and know the capabilities correctly of what he's seeing. And that's the value of a radar operator on a system, even though we've got, tons of signal processing going on that we didn't have in World War II. That's why. So
awesome. Yeah. So I just saw this. I could put on your comments. So I remember Gary Voorhees, right? He said they were wearing USAF, U.S. Air Force insignia. The guys that took.
I think there was more. I've heard more than one account of more than one type of person that went and got tapes. But again, that's not really germane to what we're talking. It doesn't really change the story. It just that people came and took it. It doesn't really matter where they were from.
And I do want to come back to that, but by the time that they send Fravor and Dietrich out to this object, there's been a ton of observation, a ton of electromagnetic energy that has been directed in the field of operation. There's been a laundry list of things that the professionals have gone through to assess whatever this or these things might be. And they've confirmed that it is something there. There is something there. It's not just sort of a weird glitch in the technology. It's not an anomaly. There's something that needs to be investigated further. So Fravor and team are sent to Vector on this target. When they get there, this is what interests me. When they arrive at this location, Fravor talks about the observation, looking down below to the sea level and seeing the churn in the water and seeing the erratic motion of this object. As a pilot who flies a lot out in open water and the things that you're used to seeing, how did his account strike you, Chris, in terms of what would have been going through your mind if you had seen an object behaving in the way that he described?
Yeah, I mean that was the video that changed my whole perspective. Was that interview with Fravor and Lex Fridman? I've tried I guess to explain before that after a while, you just get so used to it. Like you, DJ, you've done thousands and thousands of hours. If somebody was explaining to you about a MC 130, this type of mission that you did all the time, and was explaining as you walk through, here's the FLIR, I'm looking at this system, and I see this. At least for me, after so many years, it felt like I was there. It's as close as I can get to saying I saw something. I haven't seen anything that was not, my brain didn't make sense of. At least physical movements. I've seen a lot of things my brain doesn't make sense of in the world. But as far as that, it really threw me off that what would I do? And that's funny, right? That's the whole point of training, is so when you get into a situation you haven't been to, like whatever, getting shot at or something, that you will do what you've practiced. And so in that case, I think for him was just try and get closer to it. I'm sure he thought, can I get any video of this somehow? But he didn't have a pod. He has no pod to try and video it. But I think the biggest thing is, what is that thing? You talk about the inertial movements. When it's just moving, when he describes it as not moving like a helicopter. If you look at a normal helicopter, it has to change its lift vector and then get back into, and it has to actually over rotate. Okay, the same thing. Here,
the rotor mast has to lean in that direction.
Yeah.
to counter the
Just
inertial.
Let's do some plain stuff. Yeah, like yeah. Any here's a MiG-29 broken, and then whatever, my one model that made it. Well, like say you're out of formation, right? You're this plane, and you're out of formation. You have to put in an acceleration, right? So you have to change the throttle. You have to push it forward faster than you need, essentially, right? To stay level. Like, let me see.
Yep, got it.
I want to be level with this guy, say, right? So I want to catch up. I have to put more throttle in. I have to make one correction, right? And then in order to stop, if I don't change it, I'm going to keep accelerating, right? I'm going to keep accelerating. So you have to put in less power than you need to slow down and then fix it. You have to make 3 corrections. Does that make sense? I have to push the throttle forward to accelerate. So the plane, I'll start moving forward, right? But then I'm going too fast. I have to actually go back further than I need so that I slow my momentum, and then I have to push it forward to make it the correct thrust that I need. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you need 3 fixes to change your lift vector, essentially. That, at least from my experience. Okay, I'm sure there's physics guys that are gonna.
Yeah, can I just want to ad lib one thing, just to give, and it's not trying to butter up you or the fighter pilot community, but I'm from the AFSOC community, the MC-130, AC-130 community. I have asked people about this. I've talked to the CV-22 community, the MC and AC-130 community, and I'm sure if I were to be able to talk with the 160th, they would say something similar. You guys are the best in the world when it comes to identifying something in the air and evaluating its capabilities, full stop.
Yeah,
None of us.
Yeah.
I can have thousands of flight hours in an MC or an AC-130, but it doesn't mean that I understand aerial engagement. So if somebody is a layperson that's never done this, you don't know how far away you are from their level of knowledge when it comes to looking at something in the air, identifying it, and evaluating what its capabilities are and how freakish they may be or may not be.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm gonna ask a question about that too, though. So if they're coming into this to this area where the object is moving, if the object weren't bouncing around the way they described it, and if there wasn't the churn in the ocean that was described, let's say it was a stationary Tic-Tac, approximately 40 feet long, close to the surface of the water.
Yeah.
Is this something that
it's bizarre?
It's bizarre, but is this something that would have caught the eye of a pilot? Like, could he have flown right by it?
Yeah. So that's what I've been trying to explain. In the Go Fast video, I'm taking all this troll heat from Thunderfoot or whatever. But basically, if you look, at the Go Fast video. I'm sorry. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
So basically, what he's asking you is seeing this buzzing above the water. Would most pilots just fly right by that?
Yes. Sorry. All right. Yes, exactly. So when you look at how they actually locked onto the Go Fast video, that's the point. So the argument that they're making, right, that it's a bird or it's a balloon or something, is that it's essentially stationary. Okay, I mean, unless a bird, anything going less than 50 knots to us is essentially kind of stationary. Our radars can't really see it. It's very difficult for our radars to see it. Helicopters are very difficult to actually see and engage just because they're so slow. Just the way our systems work is your radar is going to pick up movement. So your radars pick up movement as well. Basically velocity change. So the Doppler shift on that pulse train, right? But your eyes work exactly the same way. And this is why when we're fighting, right? If I'm trying to intercept you, right, and say you're flying in your plane, like this, right? I'm not gonna, as I do my intercept around, I'm not gonna be here and just fly around like this, so you can just see me on the horizon. I'm basically gonna go low or high, and I'm gonna point right at you. So as I'm making this intercept to your rear, you see, as I'm when I'm going to your tail, you can't see me because because I'm point on.
Right.
Because you're not seeing this rapid movement. You're not seeing a plane form and line of sight. You see less and you want, I don't want a fast movement on the horizon, you know. So environmentals make a huge difference. They make a huge difference. You know, the sun, where the sun's coming from, how the clouds decks are laid, the moisture in the air, how far you can see.
Mhm.
And Kevin Day, they know all this stuff. You know, when they do their check-ins, the last, what's the weather, and then you give this weather briefing. Yeah, so to see, and that was a big thing for me on this, is it's just a clear day. They say it's just this it's just a clear day.
Water is
There's nothing
beautiful.
out there. It's like you're walking, you know, you're just walking to the coffee shop, and right across the way you see like this, you know, this flying thing going like this and just moving around, you know, and there's nobody else around, you know. I mean, that's basically the same analogy I would say is.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, what does it take for an object to do that? So Nathan alluded to, there's something under the surface that they have described as a fuselage-looking object under the water that's making the water boil, or at least disturbing the water. And so these guys have seen, probably by this time, hundreds of submarines that have come to the surface, and it wasn't that. So it's something else. And they see this object buzzing around, but it's moving in an erratic way.
Yes.
What does it take for something to do that? So we have an object, an aerial object. I'm not going to call it a flying object for reasons we can get into later. But what does it take to do that, Chris? To propulse something like that?
It has zero inertia. I mean, it has zero momentum. You know, so that's why, in order to, you know, a helicopter has to put our lift back in. You know, we put our lift vector this way, we'll turn. But then if you want to go the other direction or to stop your direction, you have to actually accelerate back to level. You know, that's why, you know, we accelerate to something and then we have to decelerate when something moves. You know, it gets faster to here and then it slows down, stops, and then it gets faster, it slows down, slows down. So your acceleration vectors are constantly changing. And with this, there's no inertia. It's like it's light or something. It's, you know, it doesn't adhere to our laws of physics. You know,
right, the way that we interact with something in the air. So
it's like a laser pointer. Yeah, if you flick a laser pointer around, that's kind of how it reminds me of it.
Right,
of actually moving around.
And so we get to that point, and now Dave Fravor has been vectored onto it, and he looks down and he sees it, and at some point he tells his wingman, Alex Dietrich, you stay high, I'll go low, and he points his nose down. At which point now the object, according to Dave, points the oblong nose of the Tic-Tac at him. So you as a fighter pilot are thinking what when that happens?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest difference for me on the Nimitz and the Fravor engagement, because, and that's what you're always wondering. So, you know, if I'm fighting with someone, you can tell immediately if they can't see you, right? It's this old adage, lose sight, lose fight. You know, if you merge with someone to fight them, you know, and by merge normally is, you know, you haven't been able to identify or shoot each other prior to this point, and then you pass high speed, and now you're trying to get your weapons on first, right? So you know you've engaged with an enemy, and so now you're trying to get your weapons on as fast as possible. So it's basically, from this engagement, I can tell exactly. Well, normally is when they don't see you, they're kind of continuing. You're like, where's he pointing? You know, like where is he going? Does he know I'm coming to shoot him? You know, and usually it's because they don't know, because it's just so hard to keep track of these planes, which basically, like the same thing I was trying to say with the go fast, is it's you can barely see a fighter at 4 nautical miles. You know, you can barely see a fighter at 4 nautical miles. And if I'm pointing at you, like I just showed you, you're not going to see me at 4 nautical miles. Like, it's just, you know, we talk about this. Yeah, if I'm pointed like this, you're going to see me. You know, to see a bird flying at 4 nautical miles, like halfway between you and the ground, is it's just impossible. It's like, okay, we can talk all the semantics about focal length and depth of field or whatever, but, you know, basically for them to get the lock in the Go Fast video, they had their sensor on the ground, you know, on the water, essentially, because they saw it with their eye. You know, they put their little sensor box. You know what I'm talking about? You know, they put your little sensor box out in front of it, looking outside through your helmet, and then waiting for the little white ball to fly into there. And then you look down, there it is, and now they take the lock.
That was a sweet moment.
Well, you can do that if you see it, right? If you see it, because it's a white ball traveling right over the white
Black water,
the blue water. It's bright blue water, and if you see this little white ball, you see that movement, you pick it up. You know, you will see a little white speck moving across the sky on a blue background easily.
You need contrast. You got to have contrast.
Yeah, but if it's up at 13,000 feet, it's halfway between you and the horizon. It's already 4 nautical miles anyway to see a bird with your eyes, and it's not moving. I mean, it's just not possible. So
but let me go back to my question.
Yep.
Your Fravor, you nose over and you see the object turn and face you. What are you thinking at that time?
This is the first engagement where it's maneuvering in relation to them, and this is where you can talk about why it's extraordinary. For me, this is why it's extraordinary. You know, because they look at the Omaha. You look at those other events, and we hear that, hey, these balls, they were maneuvering in relation, they were following the ships, you know, it's tracking right along. But it's not as obvious, at least for me as a pilot. When that thing points at you, it's like someone, if I can see the plane like move, like if he points his lift vector, a lift vector is, you know, where if I pull, that's where I'm going to turn. You know, if he points it like this, you know, you can tell he's like, he's looking at me, you know, it feels like the plane's looking at me, you know? And so that's what I would have felt, man, is like,
I've just been engaged. That's what I was thinking when Fravor said that. Chris just froze, so I'm going to stay with it until he comes back. Okay, Chris is back.
All right. How long was I out there?
Just a couple seconds, but I was saying, I'm going to call myself a layperson because I've never intercepted another aircraft in an aircraft. That's not what we do, what we did for a living. But I'm saying I thought Fravor, when that thing pointed at him, he would say, okay, it's on now. I've just been engaged. And then it started coming up co-altitude with him.
Yeah, so he's talking about a 2-circle fight. I have my some pens here. So basically, you have the little Tic-Tac over the water. So he's searching this little patch of water down here, okay? And they said it was like the size of a 737 under the water. And then you had your Fravor. I'll put him in green up here. He's with his 2-ship, right? So they arrived there at 25K. And so Dietrich, she just holds above, right? She's holding up here. And basically the holding pattern you're going to use is one where you can turn and see the ground. So basically 3 to 4 miles just right overhead in a constant turn. So, she's going to stay within, I would say this is like 2 to 3 nautical miles. If you can read that. So this is probably 2 to 3 nautical miles, radius of a circle. And then you're looking at like 4 miles high, so that just gives you an idea of that. So basically she's going to stay up in this holding pattern with Slate, right? Commander Slate.
Slate was the backseater for Fravor, I believe, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, so he's your experienced, he's your super experienced Wizzo. From my understanding, it sounds like he's running this engagement, at least from the back, he's the experienced, Dietrich, from what I understand, was new. She's brand new. I think this guy in this kind of situation, he's going to be running the show. And really, I think, Dietrich's probably just trying to gain SA and keep in the right formation. So as she descends, as Fravor descends down here, he's going to be basically in that same kind of over the ground turn, but down at this altitude, at a lower altitude, right? So he's descending down. If we look at above now, so let's say this is the center. So basically, they're orbiting this thing, right? You can see that. So Fravor, he's going to pitch his nose in and descend. Okay, so these are descend lines, and Dietrich's just going to stay up here watching him as he starts descending down, right? And he's going to fly just a lower circle around this thing. And so what happens is, as he starts descending down, it basically turns and it starts descending up This is above. Remember, now we're looking from above.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, this is basically in a normal fight. When we're fighting, I kind of mentioned it a little bit. You're trying to turn faster than the other guy. You're trying to raid around the circle faster. But this thing is climbing, actually. So he's climbing back up. And that's what also was amazing to me is when this thing is, when this thing is climbing back up, it just climbs from a standstill. You know, if you look at any air shows like F-22s, they have to have airspeed, some airspeed, 100 knots, you know, maybe 50 knots, but then it's a slow, you know, climbing out.
Absolutely.
This maneuver right here, where it turns at them, it turns at Fravor, and then it maneuvers against him, is crazy. That's a mind-boggling kind of maneuver there, where it just comes up and it's in relation to him. So you know it's, I mean, from everything I heard, it knows it's flying in relation to him. So
okay,
that's amazing.
So next Fravor moment is they're now in a circle where, as you said, Fravor might be slightly above the object because he leveled off when he saw it come up.
Yep.
And because obviously he's going to level off when he sees it gaining altitude, he's going to say, "Oh, okay, well, it's coming up." So
yes.
Now you have a guy who has no weapons aboard, no rounds of ammunition, and he decides to, I think they have a 40 millimeter on there, but they had no ammunition, and he decides to cut across the circle and aim his aircraft at this thing. So now we have one of two things that could happen. First of all, a Class A could happen because he could have actually hit it. And secondly, what strikes me as a non-fighter pilot aviator is the bravery it takes to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he thought about it. Let me draw this.
I mean, this is a guy who, Dave Fravor's the type of guy that when they took his tapes and they brought it to I think they brought it to the CIC, and he went up there and said, "What'd you do with my tapes from that mission?" And he said, "Oh, we've got them." He goes, "You got 30 seconds to give me those tapes. I'm going to start tearing this place apart." Like that's the type of dude that Fravor is.
Exactly. I mean, you don't get to the position, like I said, you don't get to that position by not being the man, essentially. I mean, it happens, but everything I see is he's the guy exactly like I would expect. You know, that's the guy we want leading in that position, and he's not gonna not do it. You know. Okay, so basically here I just continued. So what happens after a while is while they continue turning, remember we're looking from above. So Fravor, he's the green line. They turn if we're looking, and so what you end up with is they're about a mile across. Okay, from above, and this is a normal kind of fight. This is a neutral fight, we would call it, because we're both neutral. But what he's able to do is when you say cut across the circle, we do this to try and point your guns. This guy continues his normal turn. Then this guy, he's going to over rotate, right? Over rotate and descend. So that's where you're going to do like a diving maneuver to get across the circle and to point your nose faster. But this is how you would rejoin with them in a faster way. Okay, so as he's rejoining with him, and it didn't sound so aggressive, you know, he just kind of pitches over to continue here, and at some point in here, it just like vectors off, right? So he's trying to effect a rejoin. He's trying to get closer to it, and it just, I still don't get it, actually. It says it just disappears, but I don't know what's going on.
No, well, you got to listen. He was on Fighter Pilot Podcast. He's been on a number of shows, but I've also heard him say it didn't like quote disappear, but it moved so quickly that it looked like it disappeared. Yeah, it just moved at such a rapid pace. So when we have, you know, the way that we build aircraft is we truss mount an engine inside of an airframe, and we point the aft of the engine the direction that we opposite the direction we want it to go. And if it's a helicopter, we truss mount the engine inside there to produce shaft horsepower to turn a power turbine that turns a main rotor. which then the rotor, as you explained earlier, will tilt that with the cyclic, will tilt that main rotor head in the way that we want it to go. But here we have a craft that, if you listen to Kevin Day, that where it went from, he tracked it going from 28,000 feet to 50 feet in under 1 second. So now you would have to have some sort of a gimbal mounted, omnidirectional, not monodirectional. All our aircraft, the engines are now, of course, you have thrust vectoring in a couple of these aircraft where you're
you can't even explain the maneuver. The only way to explain that maneuver is it's a, there's two craft, or it's a anomaly in the system. It's not even, you can't even do the math on how fast it moves from there to there. It's is it faster than light? I don't, probably not, I guess.
But way faster than terminal velocity, that's for sure.
Well, Gary Voorhees, a couple times he said it's faster than our systems could track. A few times, and that is a good point. So it doesn't affect the actual, it doesn't create a shockwave. This is also very extraordinary, that it can just travel immediately to a speed that we know is well in excess of supersonic, but there's no shockwave. And I've been involved in sonic boom tests up in Alaska. They did we were getting a lot of complaints there's a lot of complaints. Sonic booms obviously are very loud, and you don't know anything in the cockpit, right? People ask me like, hey, what's it like? And I'm like, nothing. You don't know. You find out, usually you find out when you land, and it's not a good thing. You're like, oh shit, so the sonic boom aspect is another point to show, and that radar anomalies, nothing we know about physics explains that. You can't do that if you have any inertia. I could do it if I have a flashlight, and I just, I'm pointing a flashlight there somehow, and then I point it down there. But the way that we understand how matter, physically moves, and
it can't do that. And also, you again, if it moves in these ways, because they also tracked it going from down at the sea level up to 80,000 feet in, I don't know what the time frame was, but it rapid. So then you have to have a propulsion system that doesn't emit any heat energy, no thermodynamic energy that we can see in our IR spectrum. And it has to be omnidirectional, meaning it can propulse itself laterally. It can be up high and propulse itself down low, or from down low and propulse up to nearly the edge of the atmosphere. I mean, I don't think people can understand how, and without breaking the sound barrier, how incredible that would be. First of all, if you could create a propulsion system like that, you also have to be able to counter it to get it to stop. If you could get it to go that fast, you have to be, how do you navigate something like that? What, at a GPS coordinate? I mean,
it's mind-bogglingly, it doesn't make any sense. If you look at this, we look at this is the FLIR video, which is also crazy. If Mick West had been looking at this at the beginning, but if you look at this, initially I thought it was, like you were saying, down the intake of an engine, because this is what I'm kind of expecting, that previous. But here it just looks like that energy ball. It's like that ball that you see from those F-18 pilots. Sorry about that. Oh god, that failed.
I have a question from Dan about. Let me. I have a question that it came to me.
Let's go here. Let's see. We've been talking for an hour. Let's talk through the comments here. James Hetfield. Man, I love Metallica.
All right.
Proud Babylonian. Joanne Wilson. Thanks for being here. Captain Shakespeare. Alan Tovey. Zavin. Okay, let's just take. Let's see. Unknown truths. What Nathan? What do you have? I'll look here. What's a question you have?
Yeah, well, the next question I had for you is: we hear a lot of talk about the cap point. So when it disengages from Fravor, that's when he's told that the object is now at their cap. Could you quickly speak to, for those who may not be familiar with it, what is a cap point, and then who in the group of people in that strike group know what the cap point is? Like,
Yeah,
how is that known?
weird cap point. So the cap point is your combat air patrol point. Basically, there's different ways. We call it a marshal. If you're marshaling to go with bombs, if you're a bomber or a striker, then you're in the marshal. You're not in a cap, because a cap is generally you're defending an area. You know, so you're looking with your sensors one way, and then you're looking with your sensors the other way, and you're making sure nobody can go underneath you. So for specifically like an air defense practice mission, which I'm guessing they would do, just easy like basic 1v1 intercepts. That's where they're going to start. You know, so you basically, to do normal training like this, you know, it's like, okay, I'll be the good guys first, and you be the bad guys, okay, and you just fly straight at me, and now I'm going to do this intercept, okay, and then you change. Basically, we change it up. They know that you're looking at you. They don't know you're there. They are aware that you're there, and then they target you. So you practice all these maneuvers, and it's scripted essentially, right? You have to do these practice these. Just like blocking and tackling, you have to do these exact procedures. You know, that's the whole point of the mission. So the cap point is just where you start. So in the airspace, a lot of people brought this up that it is a big deal. But in my research, these are normal whiskey areas. So the cap point, I think most people would probably have used that cap point. If you look at it, it's right on the lat longs. You know, it's like whatever 3800 and whatever the north. Or the west point is, the west line. So it's right on the point. So it's someone just picked it out in the ocean in the middle towards the
arbitrary.
side. Yeah. Yes, it's arbitrary, but it's not. I think a lot of people use it. I think if I was going to go to that airspace and use that whiskey that they were assigned, chances are I'm going to look in the in-flight guide, and it's going to have, hey, here's cap point east, to make it easy, right? So yeah. It's so if like say my airspace gets full or something happens, or there's like an unexplained aerial plane or something flying through there, I'll use the next airspace. More likely weather. You know, if weather takes up this airspace, I'll say, hey, is anybody using this airspace? Whiskey, whatever it is, 104. And then you'll go use it. And so I'll look in the in-flight guide. Okay, what's my east point? Okay, hey, 2, you pick up the west point, and then I'll pick up the east point. And that's where you look in your in-flight guide and you can put in the coordinates, right? So it's a common point. It's weird that they were there, but it's not like they were mind reading or something. I think everybody probably uses that as a normal cap point, and so maybe they were there like, hey, why does everybody come here? You know.
Well, here I think the point is if Chris was flying at a Luke Air Force Base and decided that they were going to do some exercises over the water, they wouldn't know what this carrier group's cap point was.
I mean, if I had to go and guess what their point is based on the information they have, I would have probably guessed it correctly. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so
I think it's a common point in a common airspace. It's it's like I guess yeah, each airspace is a little different, and when you're going to set up the training, remember everything. All of our fighter piloting, most of it, 95% of it is not fighting. It's training, right? So we're doing most of our training. So when you're setting up your training areas, you need about 40 miles of space to practice this type of intercept mission. If I'm doing basic dogfights, I only need about 15 miles, so I can share this airspace with other people. So it's all airspace management, and that's why they know everything in this airspace. The E2, they're making sure there's no planes, there's no unwanted civilian traffic, in the airspace to have some safety violation, et cetera. So I think it's a basic cap point. I think a lot of people probably use it. It's still weird.
Okay, so finish this sentence. The fact that the UAP, the Tic-Tac, went to that point and hovered is... Finish that sentence.
It's weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's weird. Yeah. I basically, so what it would tell me is that it's either a coincidence, wild coincidence, because maybe there's many of these things we've mentioned before. Could this be multiple? It's like, could you have one at 28,000 and one at 50, and somehow the radar just picks two? I mean, the fact that it can hover at 28,000 feet and can hover at 50 feet with no visible signs of propulsion is, miraculous.
Miraculous.
Same thing. It's either a large coincidence, or they saw other airplanes using that as their normal point and was like, I wonder why this airplane thing goes over here and flies around from this point. That's more the impression I get is they saw that these planes would go to this point and hang out.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's where I wanted to go too.
Mhm.
So apologies for maybe getting a little too
Please.
speculative.
Please.
But if you take everything we've just talked about, if you take the observation over multiple days of these craft who would have absorbed all of this EMF energy, if you take the behavior when Fravor goes out to intercept the craft, which is essentially, if you think about, I think it was described as the water churning like a 747 underneath the surface of the ocean. If you think about what that looks like, it's an X. All right. If you think about the erratic ping-ponging nature of the object above that X, if you think about the way that it engages with Fravor as he circles down toward it, and then where it arrives after it leaves his nose, if you take all of these things together, does it not seem that this is some human behavior type of craft, that clearly it's intelligently controlled, but the way that it's behaving and interacting with this group, doesn't it make you think that it is human directed?
I don't know. I mean, for me, my first impression was I said it on the Martin Willis show. It's more of like an insect or something. I don't know. It's like it was doing its own little thing over here, and then realized it was being detected like a bee or something. It's busy, and then you go up to it like, hey, and you try and get close to it, and it just flies off. I mean, that was. I mean, they keep human intelligence. I don't know, or even intelligence. The biggest thing for me is that it maneuvered in relation to Fravor. That's what it's. It couldn't be just some phenomena. You could. Or it'd be very, very, very coincidental to say that this is somehow some weird, unknown magnetic anomaly with the Earth or something, and there's some phenomena there because it moved with Fravor.
We're not talking ball lightning here.
Yes, exactly.
But I
it's
think
not this thing off a plane that they see. I mean, it's moving in relation to a fighter.
I think Nathan, I think you're indicating that they're kind of saying, see, look what I can do, or look what I know. It's sort of like
exactly right.
A little bit of the way that humans would employ gamesmanship over one another. It does, the way you say that, it does sort of indicate that. But at the same time, I think there's been other, like when you look at that against what happened with Ryan Graves, it's, look, I can rotate. I don't know. So it's very hard to. It is an interesting hypothesis for sure.
This is a good question. Yeah, one of these things is just the size. It's so hard to get an idea of the size of something if you have no idea what it is, And we keep getting our range denied. Like I said, really, what I need as a combat aviator is angle to where you are and how far away you are. That's really all I need. And if I can get that for a long enough period of time. Now I can put a weapon out in front of you. I have to identify you as well. So basically, all of these systems, they're designed with the basic the idea that we'll have some idea of the size of the target. So it has been difficult. But one here from Trevor Mays. Thanks for all your support, man. It says, "Hey Chris, what do you make of Mick West's belief that the object was 20 feet in length, but this 40 feet?" and twice as close? Wouldn't Fravor know the sizes and distances? Yeah, I think without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah, I really don't care what Mick West thinks the size is because all he wants to do is pick at issues. Again, we can go through the list of names. We have the Spy 1 radar. We have all the radar operators. We have the VisObs of the guys on the deck. We have multiple aviators that saw it. We have 2 different radars that saw it. So I don't really care about if it's 20 feet or 40 feet or 60 feet. They saw something and it did something. And you can pull as many strings as you want and parallaxes, and they can't explain how it did that. Unless you think they're all lying. Then you can say, okay, it's all made up. It's all conspiracy. It's the government. But wait a minute. Before we even answer this, I have a question from Dan. Hey, hey, look over there. Everybody knows Dan. on UFO Twitter because he's just one of the finest gentlemen. Everybody loves Dan. So let me ask his question. He's actually got a couple of questions. He has 2 questions for you. Okay. Chris, right before the Tic-Tac darted off to the left in the FLIR 1 video, it looks like the auto track was starting to lose it. Do you, Chris, think could cause that loss of lock? Is it likely it was caused by the Tic-Tac actively breaking lock? Question mark.
That's the thing where you don't know, right? If it actively broke lock or if the targeting pod broke lock. I think it's very weird that the targeting pod would break lock, because again, it's a processing. It's just image processing. So in order for the Tic-Tac to break the lock, it would have to move in some manner that is outside of the parameters of the targeting pod. Yeah, and I mean, things do happen. I'm not saying I don't think it's not that I don't believe that Chad Underwood did everything and he did everything perfectly, but you can't discount the fact, like switches do get like loose, and you can accidentally hit switches. You can accidentally hit the break lock switch. I mean, these things do happen, but it doesn't matter. The debunkers they focus on all kind of these minutia of details, like, okay, what was that point, 40 feet versus 20 feet, right?
Trevor,
does it matter, like, does it even matter?
That's what I said. I don't care.
I mean, I get it. It's great if it's improving, but I don't think Mick West has ever said he thinks this is a real object, so I don't think he's coming from a point where he's trying to figure out the actual length of the object. He's just trying to prove that there's some mistake, or he's trying to point holes, which I mean, I think does provide it provides value for sure. I would, just to answer that question real fast from Trevor, is I do believe his range estimate is accurate because it was flying over the water, right? Like I mentioned before, if you don't have an idea of how big something is, like a Tic-Tac, like if it really was a Tic-Tac, it'd be very hard to discern the range if it's just up in the air. If it's the argument that they're making for the go fast, where it's halfway between you and the water, it's very hard to discern size then. But if this thing's right over the water and he has a very good reference of how far away it is, so he knows, his brain is processing all that information, right? He knows exactly how far the ground is, within reason, and this thing right above it. So I think he got a very good reference of how far away it is, and his brain was able to process, that's that, and if it looks just like an F-18, because you do that all the time, that overhead, he knows what an F-18 looks like just from all the training we do, just basic training back in the pattern. 25,000 feet is still pretty high, but
and an F-18 has these really necessary things that we call wings. And so every aircraft that we're familiar with either has a rotary wing, which is how the FAA refers to a helicopter. It refers to it as a rotary wing because if you took a look at those blades, they're shaped exactly like a wing. And a rotorcraft, meaning like one of your CV-22 basically is another form. It's a tilt rotor. Your quadcopter drones also have our tiny little wings on there. That's how these things fly. And if it doesn't have wings of any sort, rotary or fixed, then we start going, and we can't see some sort of thermodynamic energy coming off of it. Then we're like, okay, WTF, what are we looking at right here?
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing. It looks totally crazy in the FLIR as well, because you see in the TV mode, if you look in the TV mode.
Thank you, Stephen.
It's just, I mean, I'll bring it up when I'll edit it in. But basically, in the TV mode, you look at it, it's just like the perfect outline of a Tic-Tac. And I was on that interview with Mick West. We had the live stream, and we're like looking through it. I don't know how else you would show that. There's a straight line on the top of the TV image, so it's in the optical spectrum, and there's a straight line on the top and the bottom.
Well,
and then you're swapping. It's those combined. And then we do that a lot. Like we overlay spectrums, right? So if I'm in IR, I'm constantly going to TV, or I'm going to black hot to white hot to black hot to white hot, and I'm making sure that I go to TV mode, because you could always be looking at it from the wrong direction. A plane, it looks very similar, like this is like this or like this, or a plane looks almost exactly the same like this as it is like this. So you don't know if it's turning towards you or away from you, so yeah, exactly. I mean,
I've watched sensor operators and they flip through. So I was at the very beginning of the AC-130W Stinger 2 program. We got fitted with MX-15 sensors, which quickly became MX-20 sensors. That's the L3 West Cam sensor. And I as the flight engineer, would have a laptop in the flight deck, and I'd watch what they're doing and just assist, especially when we were engaging a target on the ground or looking at a scenario where you had basically people in different buildings. There's a MAM or there's a Charger or Feather walking out of building 2, et cetera, so that you could engage those targets. And you would see them flipping through all the different modes. They're constantly looking to find out what's the best mode they can get in to track this person or this object, this vehicle, et cetera. So yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I mean, Mick is coming at it from the aspect, he's not trying to figure out what it is, he's trying to figure out what it's not, and he's coming at it as, how can I prove that this isn't what people think it is? So when you're coming at it from that angle, and you can't argue with all the experts that saw it, then you have to say, oh well, what actually was the range? It's like, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, all these people said they saw what they saw, and they're all trained to do this. And to be honest, I think what a lot of people who give credibility to the story of the Navy guys, who believe that they're accurately describing what they saw, they get caught up in, I want them to release the data so that Mick West has to say he was wrong. He's never going to say he was wrong. And I don't care. Personally, my life will not change if he ever believes these guys or not. I don't care. It will not make me happier or sadder if he believes it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does make a good point. Like I said, we have to make sure we exhaust all the other options for sure. I mean, that's the whole point of science. We can say we believe that, and we don't, but the point is we need to actually look at it from an objective point of view, because we're all biased. 100% unbiased. Everybody is biased in some way. There's some filter. Like I just cannot find like the juice when I look in the refrigerator. Whatever my wife wants me to find, I open the fridge and my brain it just doesn't see it. Like it's invisible. Like, and I won't ask. I've learned. I've been married like 18 years. I won't ask where it is. I just sit there and stare. But that's just bias, man. Your brain filters. So that's the whole point of this. The science is keep it objective. I'm trying to keep it. I'm trying to keep it not
let's
but at points, I'm still myself.
Let's be objective. How does a craft move the way that it was reported by the radar, by the VisObs, and by the 4 aviators that saw it? How does a craft, actually more than that, because then you have Chad in a flight of 2, although Chad's the only one that'll speak to it. How does a craft move like that without any visual signs of propulsion?
That's what's so weird. It moves like light, right? It has no inertia, no weight, but it reflects stuff back. It reflects radar energy back. You can see it in certain instances. If you look at Dave Falch, he has a crazy video on his FLIR initially. I think that's why he started making videos. Is he was looking up at the sky and he saw a ball of IR energy, FLIR energy. And he's like, what is that? And he went to TV, like you can see in his videos. He went to TV and there's nothing there. And then he goes back and it's there. And it was there, I don't know how long, but many minutes. And I don't know if he moved, but he was able to check that this thing was there. So I don't know if they're able to stealth in certain frequencies, certain spectrums. It's hard to talk about electronic attack. It's hard to talk about jamming and stealth and all this stuff. It's just so highly classified, but you can still see an F-22, right, with your eyes. I mean, you can still see an F-35. So, it's not stealth in every spectrum at all.
Because
so
the
can't
question,
be stealth in everything. It's difficult.
the question is if this is secret U.S. tech, why are we not pumping? We spent. I gave you the link for the GAO website, and you can put that in the chat if you want. But the F-35 program, our most advanced fighter aircraft that we have, is $1.27 trillion program of what they have progged for this program. So if this technology exists, why are we not fielding craft like this that can move like this, navigate like this, so they can just go to points in space and stop on a dime? Why are we not fielding this technology in terms of creating a squadron of these things?
I don't know. Well, that's the argument, right? That maybe we have, and that's a argument that maybe we have, and that these are the these are the drones, or this is the squadron, which just is just again mind-boggling to me, because all of this is scheduled. These airspaces are normal training airspaces.
So
Like,
if this is a squadron of Air Force drones, you're gonna have an object under the water that we don't know what that is, and we're gonna ingress into a Navy MOA, and then we're going to engage Navy aircraft that are involved in training exercises, and we're not worried about a Class A at all. We're not going to call the J3 at the Pentagon and set up a training area, have them come out to Tonopah or Nellis or Edwards or Groom Lake, for that matter, and get a couple crews, give them call signs and squawks, make sure everybody's TSSCI read in, and go and test on the range where it's really actually done. Instead, we're just gonna high-foot it into their MOA and engage them without telling them. That's what people want me to believe, and I don't believe that any arm of the U.S. government would do that, because you could be looking at a Class A.
Well, but let me play a devil's advocate to that point, though, and I want to agree with you, but as a counter argument to that, what if this is starting a conversation? What if you're putting this technology in that theater because you have zero concern that there would be an incident? You understand exactly that this is a workup. You know that there aren't live munitions on these craft. You know the way in which it's going to be operating out in that area. You know that your technology can run circles around anything that this group has. And the entire point of this engagement is to spark a conversation and kind of push this into a narrative, push it out into the public in a way that asks more and more questions. It's a conversation starter. It's one domino in a series of dominoes. I don't like the idea, because I agree with you. I think it puts a lot of people in harm's way if you're just kind of putting this out there. But if you know what it is capable of doing and what it clearly demonstrated it could do, it strikes me that you're not concerned that you're going to run into a fighter craft. You're not going to bump into the ship. You're not going to, you can do whatever you want to do with impunity.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, the level of tech. I mean, it's just so many orders of magnitude above what we have now. You're talking about, technology that can move without a propulsion system that we can
omnidirectional propulsion, by the way.
Right. And let me ask a question too for you, Chris. So with in the wake of this encounter, and with the advances that we're seeing in just drone tech in general, how up to date do fighter pilots stay on the capabilities of things that are seen in the skies? And so as new drones are developed, as new drone capabilities are developed, sort of how much training is done to understand, okay, hey, there's this thing that you could see in the sky, and it does these kinds of things. And if that's being done with conventional drone technology or drone swarm technology, which we know is going to be a big part of future engagements, what about this object? Is there any kind of briefing that would have been developed that would have been shared or is shared with other pilots to at least give them some understanding of, if you're probably not going to see one of these things, but if you do, this is some of the stuff that we think it can do?
No, not if you're not read in.
I saw, and I don't know where it came from actually. Was it from Nimitz or not? But it was a conversation. You know, it was the comm only of a AWACS controller, I believe, with some Navy pilots. You know, and basically this thing joins with them, and it's just hovering over the second wing hard point. Do you guys know that conversation?
No, sir.
No, not familiar.
Someone sent it to me again. I've bitten off on stuff that's fake, so I'm like, I don't know if it's legit. But the communication is a huge, as you know, DJ, I'm sure, is the what's classified a lot is the communication, because obviously we're talking, right, and how we're communicating and how we're operating as a team, and how we're using this. It's not just the systems themselves; it's how we're using them. Is the tactics, so that is going to be relatively classified. But that communication was very very legitimate. So here's what we did. I'm trying to get this story is when we did training, we would go and you want to instill some event, right, in the training. So we would have where we want to pretend that someone got shot down, and so we're practicing what are you going to do to go and help them, to protect them, to make sure they're okay, to set up their coordinates so that we can send the helicopters. I was a search and rescue expert, so so basically you're coordinating all this information for this complicated engagement, for the CSAR. And sorry, DJ, go ahead.
I'll answer.
Yeah.
What his question is the answer is if that technology is protected inside of a sapper, then Chris or in his fighter squadron or I would not have been briefed on what that technology is unless you had a need to know. If you saw something or reported seeing something, then you would be approached by the people who are, are part of that classification authority and say, hey, you didn't see that, or here's an NDA to say that you didn't see that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're not briefed unless you have a need to know. The main thing with classified information, you have to have a need to know.
Exactly. So what we do, right, is when they step, right, so they go to do the mission, we want to pretend that this thing happens, so we give them an envelope. And basically you put tape over it, and you draw on it so you can tell if they open it or not. You give them 3 envelopes, and sometimes you don't have them open it. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So if they do open it, you punish them, right? You hammer them. And so when they get in the air, they have this envelope. They don't know what's in it. And then you say over the radio, hey, open the envelope. And then they cut open the envelope, they open it, and it says, hey, you have been shot down, right? Pretend that you've been shot down. Here's your coordinate. Go here, exercise. So the same thing in this comm example with the AWACS is they say, open the blue envelope. That's part of the communication at the end, is they say, hey, open the blue envelope. And so that would mean, hey, now they take it out and they open the envelope. And what you're asking, Nathan, is in there, it would say, because they don't have a need to know yet, DJ, right? But once they see that thing, all of a sudden they're on the need to know list. And so they say, hey, open the envelope. So they pull out the envelope and they say, okay, try and take a picture of it. This is why we gave you that camera, or, whatever. But they don't, again, it's not a need to know unless they see it and then they have the envelope. So in certain instances out there, if that's a legit, and it seems legit for that reason, because I wonder if people know about the envelope thing, et cetera. So.
And that makes sense to me, but I guess what I want to get at there, though, too, is if all of the data gathered in this encounter is legitimate, which I think we're arguing that it is. There's radar data.
We're assuming it is. Yeah,
we're assuming that
very
it is
strong. Yep.
Yeah, strong evidence where this was a real thing. All of that data collection would have been put into a comprehensive sort of report, right? Like, this is what the object did. This is how it was observed. This is, what we know about it. This is kind of what it returned to us or didn't return to us. If this is a real thing, isn't this information, or wouldn't you want this information shared with other pilots that are going to be operating in other theaters? Like, hey, you could run into something that does this. I'm not saying it's classified, but we know that this is a real thing that happened, and you could run into it. And if you do, this is what we know it can do.
I can speak to this one just initially, and then let Chris follow up. The Navy did have a read file on this for the Ryan Graves guys, because they were seeing him every day. So there was now explain them just real quickly. A read file, when you come in to fly every day, you're going to sign off that you've read the latest things that you need to know about that aren't published in one of our books somewhere. So in that read file, the latest and greatest will come out. You're going to read over everything that came out that you haven't seen since last time you flew, which could have been the day prior. But in any case, you're going to sign off that you read that information. And they did say, be aware that you may see these things in our working airspace, even though ostensibly their working airspace is moving the whole time. But it was following them, according to Graves.
Right. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, a different, what's interesting too is some of the similarities but differences. I don't remember hearing about any Tic-Tac, on the East Coast. Right. Again, I'm into researching all that. I honestly, so I think we've covered most topics. I think the biggest thing is it's just hard to accept that it actually happened. I hear it all the time from all these people just saying there is no evidence. There's no evidence, and it's like, well, how do you discount hundreds, maybe thousands of eyewitnesses? How do you discount all the radar information? How do you discount the FLIR video? How do you discount all the pilots? The E2 operators, the ship, the radar operators.
The spy one, yeah. That's why we hired those people.
It's a paradigm shifting acceptance, and I think people rightfully do have a means to or requirement for more evidence, which I think is why we do need more evidence. I'm talking with Avi Loeb, so Professor Avi Loeb, on Wednesday. Started the Galileo project, so that'd be awesome. I would love to get into other ways to actually just get our own information. Send up our own. I would like to do it from space, where we just send up cheap satellites with those cameras he's talking, with the telescopes he has on there, and just send those up. It'll see how hard that would be to get approved. But Dan, I just think we need more information.
Agree.
Hey, can we do? Dan has a second question. Can we do some quick hitter?
Let's do a
quick
few
hitter
more.
listener
Sounds
questions.
Good.
All right, here's from Dan. And Dan, because he's such a he's a bright light in the UFO community. He said he wonders if you have an opinion on which sensor would be best suited for collecting data on UAPs. Is that in your wheelhouse, Chris? And would he have a guess about if any of our EM systems would likely to interfere with UAPs navigation systems and possibly cause them to crash? So basically, if you could fire off some EM and interfere with them, because that's a rumor that's out there. I don't know if it's true or not.
You can
collecting data first. Collecting data first, though.
Yeah, you brought up a good point, right? If you can go as fast as they're traveling, if you can travel as fast as they're traveling, then remember like Dune, where they like use the spice to like see through. Really, the idea is they have to see the point that they're gonna end up at. That's the whole point of the spice travelers in Dune. So how do they know where they're gonna go? Like you brought up. The navigation there's no windows on this thing. There's no sensors. This is completely. I would call it completely alien technology. Look, it just looks so weird. Just a Tic-Tac, So, yeah,
Well, you don't need windows because there's definitely not a human inside. If it accelerates at that speed, they'd be crushed. All right, what you got for listener?
Let's see. Well, why don't we take any other questions? What do you guys?
That's Dan had that was basically his question is what do you think would be best suited? What type of sensor?
Yes. Okay.
So you think of satellites,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
As we showed, I think as Dave showed, is you want it in IR and as many spectrums as you can hit, and it looks like IR has been really good. That FLIR, that the Agua Dia was weird, but the most recent with the Omaha, that was clear. And then the FLIR pods, we can see them with that, even though it does look, weird sometimes. So I would go with multi-spectrum. If you can do like an IR, and that can see at night as well. So I would go IR and then also visible, because it looks like they may be invisible to visible spectrum for some reason. And then you want more than one position. Right, because if we only that's the problem with a lot of these issues is we only have the FLIR. All I have is one video of that, no other corroborating data. Whereas if we had the radar, if you could correlate, with timestamps, the radar data along with. So if you have two sensors, looking at a point, now I know how far away it is, and I can figure out how big it is. So that's what I would say. IR. I have been thinking about it. I want to ask Abby about it. Is how do we make our own make our own systems? Make it open source, just like open source, direct. Like there's no in between. It's like we use blockchain technology and we just go straight to a database, and no one can mess with it.
Like Skyhub. Have you seen Skyhub? You
No,
gotta check out Skyhub.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, so let's say
you go.
Let's say there is aliens, right? And they do exist, and or there's elements of our society that are interested in keeping this quiet. Okay, the best place, the best way that would happen is if we keep all the information classified or stovepiped, and then we put it in like one place, right? And if they really do have like this advanced technology, they can just get rid of it. But now, if we open source all of our stuff, we put it on like put it on blockchain or put it on technology that's open source, people can't, NSA can't break blockchain, so keep it base level open source. And now it's pretty tough to keep that information on a lid, or keep a lid on that information. So yeah, I hope to do that in the future. I guess 5x5 News, welcome. You said Raytheon guys in the chat. Is that true? Do we have any AppClear texts?
No.
Okay, we'll answer this from Gunther. Where'd it go? Is there a possibility the Chinese have developed advanced tech for their drones? Any rumors of them doing new tech? So I did overseas the last 6 years, so I'm not up to date on any sort of like Chinese technology. 100% they have developed advanced tech for their drones. That without a doubt, this is the future of fighting. You can watch that conference. The Air Warfare Conference, Elon Musk was in. He talks about future fighting is going to be drone related, etc. So without a doubt, they have advanced tech for their drones. The biggest thing in
Tic-Tac
maybe 2004,
advanced as Tic-Tac.
No, I mean even you look at gimbal, right? So a gimbal, it looks. Let me get. It looks innocuous enough. It's just it's just flying. But really, if you look at the altitudes flying at 25,000 feet, there's not that much air up there. You have half the air you have at 18,000 feet. That's why a helicopter cannot fly up those altitudes, or it's unheard of. Like Everest, they have serious issues in the mountains. I worked with search and rescue, and I learned a ton about helicopters. They're always limited on their weight because their propellers can't go faster than supersonic, or the faster they go past supersonic, they run against those issues we're talking about, those shock waves. So they're limited in speed. Of course, I'm sure I'll get shot down with physics. But yeah, they're limited. So, even an Osprey, I don't think could do what that thing was doing. Technology.
They can't. I can tell you, yeah, for sure they can't. And even the CH-47 or MH-47s can do rescue at higher altitudes than a CV-22 does.
Yeah, exactly. So for it to be like a rotor technology, like a drone rotor technology, I think is not possible because it'd be very difficult. It's at 25,000 feet and flying 300 knots or 250 something knots.
There's one other important point to that too. Well, one, it was flying into, he mentions on the video, it was flying into 120 knot wind doing that speed. Second of all, he said it was not visual. It was only on IR.
Yes, exactly.
That
was really, what's interesting for me for Falch. There was one other question. Yeah, exactly. It's you want multi-spectrum, and IR is the best because it works at night and during the day, right? So I would go with
the fact that Graves couldn't see it with Mark 1 eyeballs, but he saw it with his pod. That's like
for Underwood, you mean?
No, Ryan Graves. So we're talking about the Roosevelt.
Yes, exactly.
He could not see it with Mark 1 eyeballs, but he saw it on his sensor.
And I think that's what freaks these guys out. Imagine you think something's there. You say, hey, hang on a minute, mission. I'm going to go check something out over here. And then you go and track something down, and it just like, you can't find it. It's just gone. I mean, that's kind of the impression I get. There was one last question was, what about NATO? I can't remember. Sorry. Basically, are you hearing about this in other places? And I never heard of anything when I was flying. It just I was always under the impression that I believe, without a doubt, there's or it's very high chance that we're not alone, but it's just so far away. that based on, you know, the travel, faster than light travel is not possible. It would take forever, you know, so it's just not possible. So
Yeah.
we just never considered it. You know, you're never thinking about it. I was never vectored on anything. Like I think you notice that with the Air Force, they haven't had a lot of these events. They seem kind of against it for some reason. Maybe they're just traumatized from the first time around. And
if it were me, Chris, and I were the government, and if I were the U.S. government, and I had this Tic-Tac technology that we've spoken as is right now, I would be flying over North Korea. I would be flying over nuclear, Russian nuclear sub facilities. I would be flying over China. I'd be flying in all those places right now if I had that technology where I thought that there's no way that they could shoot me down.
But there have been cases when I was here in Europe. My buddy here, Salva, he's a buddy of mine, and he was all into, you know, he kept asking me, you know, have you seen any aliens? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, once, you know. And he's like, no way, you know. And I'm like, no, like every time, you know, that was a common joke. He would never believe that I didn't see anything. But yes, there have been other pilots that I've seen on documentaries. There were Spanish pilots that saw. There's been French pilots, I believe, in Afghanistan, etc. So there has been other cases.
I mean, I'd be flying multiple sorties a day. If the operating theory, and this is what we talked about, Nathan, that this craft, it's U.S. craft, and I'm testing against the Navy guys, and I feel like it's impervious. Because so here we are burning dinosaur fuel using MX-20s, but to gather intelligence, and these guys have something that the U.S. government has something that's white, has no extremities hanging off of it, no cameras, no anything. But I could go gather intel. I'd be flying 50 sorties a day over. I'd be flying over Iran. I'd be flying over Russia. I'd be flying over China every day, gathering intel. First of all, I don't have to worry about fuel. I don't have to worry about anything. I know they can only see me. Oh, there's only certain systems they have that can see me, and they can't shoot me down. And if they do try to shoot me down, I'm just going to zip away. I'd be flying. I can't think of how many sorties. How many sorties would you be flying every day with this thing?
With
tons.
With the app flare, or
if you had to if you had to Tic-Tac, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's just mind-boggling technology, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm still on the Nimitz. Like I said, I'll be talking with Avi Loeb on Wednesday, so that is exciting as well. Thank you, DJ and Nathan from Life MMA and NBA podcast. Thanks to everybody who was in the chats. This is the first live stream, so let me know how it went. I'll go ahead and add some better editing afterwards. But anyway, guys, thanks for being here. Any last parting shots, DJ or Nathan?
I'm good, Chris. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, I want to thank Nathan. Thank you, brother, for always bringing the conversation to a higher level, man.
Anytime.
All right, guys.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, everybody. Closing the stream. See ya. Have a great Sunday.